Today I'll be going over the Christian hymn, Blest Be the Tie That Binds. I'm going to begin by playing the full arrangement together. This is an arrangement from a hymnal for SATB, Soprano, Alto, Tenor, Bass. Now, this means that it's not strictly a piano part. It's not designed to be played strictly by the piano, though of course it is played by the piano and by the organ in many churches. And so after I do this, I'm going to break down how I would lead a choir through each of these parts and how I would think about approaching this as a keyboardist at a church. So here's the full arrangement, complete with an introduction from the pickup to measure 11. And I'm going to put the music on the screen here so you can follow along if you're so inclined. Okay, so now let's imagine I had to lead each section of the choir by itself. I would begin by giving them their notes. So let's start with the soprano. Their first note is an A. And then I would play the soprano part. Okay, now it's time for the altos. The altos' first pitch is an F. Here's the altos. 1, 2. Significantly more difficult and angular than the soprano part. Interesting how this piece starts off with a pretty difficult alto part. And then ends on a fairly monotone phrase. So it's like... Interesting. So now let's do the altos and the sopranos together. So we have altos and we have sopranos. And here I might use my two hands to help me kind of keep my bearings as I go through this arrangement. Keep in mind, this is not actually designed for the piano, it's designed for a choir. So there's no guarantee ever, really, that it's going to be perfectly playable on a keyboard. But this one should be fine. Let's give it a try. Counting off as if there were singers here. 1, 2. Pretty. Okay, now let's take a look at the, why don't we do the bass part next? So here's the bass part, the lowest part in the choral arrangement, which starts with a low F. 1, 2. arrangement. Okay, so that's the bass part. Let's do the tenors next. The tenor's first note is a C. Here we go. 1, 2. So as the alto is more difficult than the soprano, I say difficult, well, more unpredictable as a part. As the alto is more predictable than the soprano, so too is the tenor more unpredictable than the bass. Let's now combine the tenor and bass together and see what that sounds like. Here's bass, here's tenor. By the way, a good practice I've found is to start with the low notes and work your way up when you're giving people their pitches. So for example, if you're giving an entire choir their pitches, do the bass, the tenor, the alto, and then the soprano. But we're not doing that. We're just doing the bass and the tenor right now. Here we go. 1, 2. Okay, now let's combine the tenor with the alto. I don't hear this pairing quite as much, but it's an interesting thing to do because you strip away both the tonal bottom of the chord and the melodic top. So you just hear this juicy inner center. It's also substantially more difficult as an accompanist, at least in this case, because you may notice the alto and the tenor are visually separated by all of the text of the hymn. So this requires a lot of rapid moving of your eyes up and down to check to make sure you've got your notes. Much more difficult, requires a little bit of practice, and there's a limit to how much anybody can do this. For example, if you're asked to play an 8-part choir score and you don't have a piano accompaniment that's a score reduction of all that material, well, although that does sometimes happen in really intense choir rehearsals, with a really good choir perhaps, that does happen, but it's pretty, I would argue that's not a reasonable demand of an accompanist to be able to distill 8 parts like that. Even somebody who's a conductor can't immediately distill a whole score like that. It takes a long time and it takes some previous study. So just a note to directors, if you have a score that is beyond an ordinary SATB score, one that is hard to sight read, don't ask your pianist to sight read it because you probably won't get a good result. Okay, all that preamble out of the way, let's try alto and tenor together. See what that sounds like. So we begin the reference notes with the low note, with the C for the tenors, and then the F for the alto. Let's give it a try. 1, 2. Okay, now we have probably the most difficult thing to do, which is to pair the soprano with the bass. And this is difficult because the soprano and the bass are maximally separated by the space on the page. They're visually very far apart. Again, this requires a lot of moving your eyes back up and down. And this is doable with an SATB part. It becomes less reasonable as you get more and more complex scores. So here's the bass part. Here's the soprano part, or the soprano note, starting with an A. Let's try this out. 1, 2. Now this particular example is not that bad because the basses have a very simple root position pattern. They're basically just outlining the chords. Is it an F major chord? They're on F. Is it a C chord? They're on C. But some choir arrangements are more difficult than this. Okay, now let's talk about putting the SATB together, how you would manage this. This particular piece is not too bad, but you do run into a few chords that are technically not possible if you assign the right hand to the treble clef and the bass in the left hand to the bass clef. If you are strictly treble clef, bass clef, then you're going to be in for a bad time. What you want to do is freely move notes between the hands as makes sense for their ranges. So I'll give you an example. There's an example in measure 11 here on beat 3. So we have is like to, and you'll notice the left hand goes from B flat to D. There's a big interval of a tenth between the bass and the tenor. Now, unless you're more physically endowed with your hand size than I am, this is going to be unreasonable. And you have a couple of ways of dealing with this in the moment. First off, you can omit the note. I would prioritize the bass generally, but you can omit one of the notes. Not necessary here, but that is something you can do. You can roll the chord if you must. You can go. You can be. I don't tend to like doing that because it disrupts the rhythm of the hymn. But if you really want to get harmonies in that you literally cannot make with your hands, that's another approach. A third approach is to transpose the note. Again, none of these things are really required here, but let's just say. Let's say you can't reach this no matter what you do. A third thing you could do would be to transpose that note. Here, you can't really do it, but let's say you wanted to move that D to a different octave. Well, I suppose you could bring it down here. You could have the D an octave down, so your left hand can play B flat and D together. Doesn't sound quite as good, in my opinion. I don't know, it's not bad, but not what you need to do here. Here, the solution is actually super simple. All you need to do is take that D in your right hand. That's all. So we have a right hand that does. You just take that D in your thumb of your right hand. Very easy, very simple, but you need to notice that that's something that's possible in this case. So always be on the lookout for, can I play this if I just take this in the other hand? Most of the time you can. Not always, but most of the time. Other tricky moments. Well, the last measure is another example of this. We have a left hand, or a bass clef, a left hand. A bass clef that goes F, F, and A, another interval of a tenth. Now that's wide enough to make it impossible for me to play with one hand, but I can take that A in the right hand. So the right hand just goes like that, and the left hand just has an octave. No big deal. So that is how you tackle probably the majority of situations like that in a hymn. Now, I've already played through this. once as written. So if you want to review that, you can go back to the earlier portion of this video when I do that. But I also want to show you how I would interpret this if I didn't strictly feel the need to follow the choral arrangement. Here's where things get interesting, where they get kind of creative. We know that we want to keep the melody. That's really not negotiable. You have to have the melody correct for people to sing along with it. They're going to sing the melody. If you're pretty sure that nobody wants to sing harmony, you may be able to get away with a different bass line. But the bass line is probably second most important. If you have nothing else, melody and bass, soprano and bass, will provide you with the skeleton of the piece. And you can hear that if you listen to them together. That soprano bass pairing, that really is the essence of this tonal arrangement. But now here's where things get interesting. Let's say you want to play this more like a lead sheet. Let's say you want to do F major as a chord in your left hand and the melody in your right hand, or C major as a chord, or B flat major as a chord. The reason you might want to do this is it opens up lots of possibilities for kind of enriching the music, making it a little bit more interesting, maybe providing variety on a different verse or something. So here are some of the things you can do with that. And I'll leave the video on this topic. If you just want to play a very vanilla presentation of this, you can put triads in your left hand. Okay, so the right hand would play the melody. I could slip in some more triads at the end there. I might go. Maybe there's some very rapid chord shifts there that might be optionally useful, optionally interesting or beautiful. But these triads are only the most, they're the most straightforward interpretation of the tune. You can do open chords for starters. All you have to do is change a closed chord where the notes are close together, and an open chord where the notes are further apart, where they're, probably in this case, arpeggiated. So the left hand might sound like something like this. Feel that? Much more rich. As I'm starting to hint at, this approach also allows you to choose your own chords. And that's where things get really interesting and creative. Because once you're in control of the harmonies, you're in control of the emotion of the tune. You can completely change the context. Now, I would not do this when I'm playing with a choir, but I would do this if I was playing this in an offertory. Here's how I might play this tune in an offertory, where I take the melody, clearly recognizable throughout, and place that melody as if it were a person in a number of different harmonic settings, in scenes and environments, and see what that does to the emotions of the tune. It's a way of exploring, breaking apart, and really rediscovering, breathing new life into a tune as if you've never heard it before. Here's Blest Be the Tie That Binds. Okay, so I hope I showed you all the way from beginning with a tune, understanding the melody, feeling how it's arranged on the page, analyzing each part, teaching a part to a choir, all the way up to creating something new, building on the music that came before you, and taking your audience to a new place, using the basic techniques that I laid out at the beginning of the video. And then maybe a few other things too. I threw a couple of things into that improvisation, and I can talk about those. If you like this topic, maybe subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm going to try and do more videos like this in the future. I'm just getting started doing this sort of thing, so bear with me with any rough edges here. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you found it useful. If you have feedback for me, as of posting this video, I'm not putting comments beneath videos, so please just send me an email and I'll put that in the description. Thank you for watching.